All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for making a commitment to be a part of the program, Boy Scouts. I really appreciate it. This session tonight is really around, well, Eagle Project review for committee members. As a part of the proposal process, the scout needs to present his proposal to the committee, and hopefully what we'll cover tonight is how you would go about doing that and what are the things that you should be looking for. Okay. My name is Todd Hausholt. I am the Pioneer District Advancement Chair. I've been doing this role for about 11 years. I've held a variety of roles in the troop that my two boys were in. I am an Eagle Scout, so I'm intimately familiar with this, and I'm the father of two Eagle Scouts. And as a committee, or as the advancement chair, I have worked with about 800 scouts in the last 11 years as they've gone through this process. And as I tell anybody that'll listen, this is probably one of the best jobs in scouting, is to be able to see what these young adults are capable of and what they've done through this process. So I'm going to make the assumption that most of you have been around scouting for a little while. Eagle is that pinnacle of the scouting trail. You probably know as your kids have joined, they went from scout to tenderfoot all the way up to life, and now they're on the cusp of going to Eagle. And it is quite an honor and quite a fair amount of work and achievement to complete it. I have a couple of pictures in here because I am always amazed at what some of these scouts have done through their Eagle projects. Most of the things that you'll see here tonight are physical. That means they're building something, but they don't have to build something. Scouts have been extremely creative in providing service to others in a variety of ways. This scout in here, he built a park awning or cover at a local park. He designed it, built it with volunteers, furnished it and completed it. If you look at something like that, you go, probably nicer than what I have in my back patio. It's a pretty nice thing. This one here, most people don't know what this is, but I love the story of this scout. This is a viewing stand for marching band competition. And it is tiered so that the judges are not looking at the judge next to them as the marching band walks by. They all have clear view of the marching band and they judge this. That in and of itself isn't remarkable. What I found remarkable with this scout is that when he was going through the proposal process and he had designed it and he was extremely excited by it, he was in the Del Mar marching band, and he ended up being actually working there after he graduated from high school for a number of years. But as he was a Life Scout in building this, he had the commitment from the school to fund all of the material for this. And literally 2 weeks before he was going to start his first workday, they decided to not fund it. So he didn't have any fundraising. And so he scrambled around, and I didn't know this at the time, but you can buy used lumber. There are places that sell used lumber. And so he went through probably about a week of figuring out how much it was going to cost using used lumber to build this. This is one of those things that in the process of doing a project, you have no idea what could go wrong. And it happened to him. This one here, he built a garden fence because the little varmints were getting in. The interesting thing is the little varmints continued to get in, but they just happened to climb over the fence. But this is what the beneficiary wanted, was this fence with a gate. This is one of the more traditional projects. I've seen, I can't tell you how many of these I've seen, benches with planter boxes in it for schools and churches and parks and so on. This one here is a flagstone pathway at the church where the troop meets. Um, he, uh, he removed all the flagstone, put in a cement base, put the flagstone back in, put mortar in, spent a tremendous number of weekends building this, and it stands today. It's 20 years later. Just a remarkable piece of work. Each one of these projects, behind each one of them, is a scout with a story. And you get to be a part of that as you go through this, this journey. As I mentioned, I've been the advancement chair for 11 years. And it was the very first scout that called me. His name was TT2. And he called me and he said, Mr. Hausholt, I am ready for my Eagle Board review. And I'm looking through all of my paperwork, and I got passed on from the previous advancement chair all of the projects and all the paperwork. I couldn't find TT anywhere in there. And I said, TT, have you turned in your paperwork? And he goes, yeah. And he says, I've completed my Eagle project, and Scoutmasters approved it, and I'm ready for my board of review. And I said, TT, we've never spoken, and we don't have any record that you've even done a proposal. And he goes, well, I approved it. I got it approved by the Scoutmaster. Well, you'll hear as we go through some of the training tonight that you have to have, every project has to be approved by the beneficiary, by the Scoutmaster, by the unit committee, and by the district. And I was quite perplexed because I didn't know what to do. The scout had already done his project. And I said, TT, I don't have any context of what you committed to doing for the school, for your project. You haven't gone through any of the appropriate process or paperwork, and we can't do this. Spent a lot of time with the Scoutmaster. It really wasn't the Scout's fault. It was really the Scoutmaster's fault. He should never have approved it. He ended up going back and doing another project. I was so grateful that he did that because I didn't want him to be discouraged and not finish. Another scout, Brandon Ronnie, he came in and he reviewed his project with us. It was a great project. He was building a redwood path at a school park, and it was about 100 feet long. And I think all the wood that he had on there was like $500 or something. And I'm looking at him and it's like, this just doesn't seem right. If you got a redwood path that's 100 feet long, how can it only be $500? And he goes, well, it's, $1 per linear foot, and it's 100 feet. So it's 100 feet of $100 worth of redwood, and, various other things. And I'm looking at him and I said, Brandon, how wide is the path? And he goes, oh, it's 4 feet wide. We had to do it 4 feet wide because it had to meet the American Disabilities Act width. And I said, okay. So it's 100 feet long, 4 feet wide. So isn't that 400 linear feet? And you just kind of watch him. He's looking at me and he's like, you can just see his face kind of go white. His eyes get really big. And he goes, uh-oh. I go, yeah, you can't possibly do this. It was about a $10,000 project. And we spent quite a bit of time working with him and scaling back the project and reproposing it. And the school, it was funny because the school goes, we were just so excited that someone was going to do it. We didn't think he could do it. Well, he couldn't. And so our other part of our role is to make sure that the scout is successful. So as I've mentioned, I've got a ton of these stories, right? So what we're talking about here is the fifth requirement for Eagle. While a Life Scout, plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project. And each one of those words are important. Plan, develop, and give leadership to others. And I use those all the time as I'm talking to the scout. a lot of scouts will come and they'll pull some plans off of the internet for a bookcase or something like that. And I say, okay, so do you understand these plans? Oh yeah. So, okay, well, what kind of screws are you going to use? Oh, we're going to use nails. I said, okay. All right. What kind of wood are you going to use? Wood. And what are the measurements? And not that he has to have that level of detail. The point I make with the scouts is if they pull off the plans from the internet, they really aren't theirs. And I'm not saying don't use those plans. Those plans are phenomenal, but in those designs. But it has to be yours. And you will not be able to lead it if you're using somebody else's work. You may still use that design or that plan from the internet, but you have to make it yours. You have to internalize it. You have to understand what is it going to take to do that. You may do a prototype. You may do something like that to really make sure you understand it. Plan, develop, and give leadership to others. The project should not benefit an organization other than Boy Scouts. Typically, it's a church, a school, something in the community. It could be the city, could be a state park, could be a county park, something like that. It cannot be any Scout or Boy Scout organization. And I have to be careful about using BSA organization. The project proposal must be approved before the Scout starts. It has to be approved by the benefiting organization, the Scoutmaster, the troop committee, which is why you're here tonight, and then the district. Okay. The project proposal must be approved by the benefiting organization. Typically, they're one of the ones that approve it first. What we encourage the Scout to do is once the benefiting organization has approved it, you're going to go through a whole lot more work. You're going to go through work with your Scoutmaster, with the committee, and with the district. More than likely, you're going to want to go back to the beneficiary and say, this is what I'm going to do. I now have the detailed plans. Is this what you want? Additionally, BSA requires that they use the service project workbook. It's available on the internet. It's a PDF. It's an editable PDF. Some Scouts use Google Docs. Some use Word. Some use the Mac product. I don't remember what it's called for it. They have to have the basic information in the workbook. That is what the council requires. Okay. I'm not going to read the slides to you. I'm going to just kind of hit on some key points in here and things that I've run across over the last several years. An Eagle service project is an individual matter. It is one Scout, one project. It is not two Scouts, one project. We've actually had twins come to us. They want to do a project together. We've actually had brothers. We've actually had buddies, Scout buddies, that want to do the same project. And what we end up doing is we work with them and say there has to be a distinct beginning and end. That way you can demonstrate your leadership. And then there's another distinct beginning and another distinct end. And that Scout can show his leadership, show his planning, show his development. So they really have to be separate. Can you work on the same work day? Yeah, you can. Probably not advisable. And the reason I'm saying that is we know how the youth work. They kind of bundle up with a group of kids, and you really want them to be able to support each Scout and each project. Okay. Routine labor or a service normally rendered should not be considered as a project. We've had Scouts come to us and say, hey, we're gonna mow the lawn at the church and trim all the bushes. And I will say, well, that is a great service project, but that's probably something that the church does normally. They have a work day and they go do it. How is this something that's an Eagle worthy service project? Be a great project for the troop, but it's really not an Eagle project because it's routine labor. We had a number of years ago, the Red Cross loved the Boy Scouts. because they basically created a blood drive in a box kit for scouts. And so the Eagle Scout or the Life Scout would come pick up a kit. Everything was done for him, and he would show up on his the blood donor day, and he would work. And so again, that was a service that was normally rendered. Now, if he went off and created his own blood drive, that would be an entirely different story. But it's, again, something that's not routine. Okay. The scout must submit his proposal, idea, and secure prior approval, as we mentioned, the unit leader, unit committee, and the council or district before the project is started. One of the things I tell a lot of the adults, the approval does not mean that he will become an Eagle. It really depends how the project was carried out. Did that project allow the scout to render service to somebody else? Did that project allow him to provide the leadership of an Eagle Scout? And did he develop it? Okay. We've had scouts that didn't do any planning, and they were denied their initial Eagle in their initial Eagle Board of Review. They have to do those things. That's why the requirement is stated as it is. Okay. All right. So the workbook and the project itself, there are several components to it. There's the proposal, and it's basically saying, this is what I want to do, and this is the beneficiary I want to do it for. He gets that approved. He gets that signed off and approved. He then develops a plan, a detailed step-by-step plan. That plan is then used on the work days. The work days are, like any other typically weekend, where scouts come together or volunteers come together and they execute to that plan. There is then a retrospective or a project report. And that project report is, what did I learn? What worked and what didn't work? Okay. All right. So when you look at the proposal as a committee or as a scoutmaster, as a district leader, this is the criteria that you all should be looking at it. And this is certainly the criteria that I look at it when the scouts come to us for our district. Does that proposal provide sufficient opportunity to meet the requirement? Does it allow the scout to plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project? And so while that's kind of broad and relatively subjective, you can clearly see components of that in the proposal. Do they have a plan? Do they really have an idea of what they're going to develop and how they're going to do it? And what they're doing, does it give them the opportunity to lead others? We've had projects come to us where the scouts will go, well, I am going to build a website. And I said, okay, that's really cool. So how are you giving leadership to others? Oh, well, I'm going to build the website. And I'm like, no. You can't be doing all the work. You have to find a way that you're leading others to build that website. So when you look at that proposal, you're going to be looking for those things that allow them to provide that leadership. Is the project itself, is it feasible? It could be the case like Brandon Ronnie, where financially it was not feasible. It could be others where the scout may not have the skill set to do the work that's required. A lot of scouts will come to me and say, can I do something that's not a woodworking project? And I say, of course you can, because I don't know how to work with wood. I've never done it before. So again, they have to have some capability to do it. That doesn't mean they can't learn along the way, but do they have the raw capability to do it? Is it going to be feasible for them? Will the safety issues be addressed as they go along? And so when you look at a proposal or when you look at a plan, you're going to be thinking about, okay, are they going to have a first aid kit close by? Are they going to have 2 deep leadership on the work days? Have they looked over the tool guidelines for the safety issues to be addressed? There are many tools that are prohibited all outright. For example, a nail gun. You can't use a nail gun on an Eagle project. You can't use a nail gun in scouting, period. It's too much like just using a gun. It's like a toy. Um, Table saw. What are the issues and how do you safely use a table saw? Well, scouts that are less than 18 cannot use them in the BSA program. So you have an adult do that. But there are other tools that you can use. So making sure that the safety issues are being addressed. The next one is a very subjective kind of criteria is further steps for detailed planning. I'm going to say about 8 or 9 years ago, what the scouts were required to do is they were required to present their plan, not the proposal, but the actual detailed step-by-step plan. And typically a plan for, building a table or a workbench or something like that, it can be pretty extensive. You have to have all the measurements, you have to have a cut sheet, you have to have the design, obviously, very, very detailed plan. They switched that a number of years ago to a proposal. Now, we still have to make sure that the scout's going to have a positive experience and that the beneficiary is going to get what they want. So we want to talk to the scout about making sure that they understand their proposal is what we're approving tonight. Your next step is to go do the plans. We will typically ask the scout, we meet, our district meets Tuesday and Thursday evenings. And I love it. On Thursday evening, we'll ask the scout, well, when do you plan to start your first work day? Oh, Saturday. It's like, oh, well, how are you going to get your plan done by Saturday? And most of them, we encourage them to take a lot more time and put that step-by-step detailed plan together. And the last one, probably the most subjective, is that the scout is on the right track for a reasonable chance of a positive experience. The only time we've run across some of these things where this isn't going to work, or this particular proposal or project isn't going to work, is we've had scouts that have worked with, could be a school, could be a county park, where there has been turnover in the sponsor. So the park will say, hey, we'd like you to build these six picnic tables. The guy that was representing the park, he leaves, they have a new person coming in. Well, we don't want tables, we want awnings. And you begin to see that, okay, what you designed is not going to work for the proposal that you're going to present to your beneficiary. And we want to make sure that, again, they have a positive experience and that the beneficiary gets what they're looking for. Okay. The approvals, I've mentioned who they are. And I cannot stress this enough. The proposal has to be approved before work and fundraising can start. Now, there are troops that do fundraising for Eagle projects in a generic sense, and that's absolutely okay. There are troops that have scout accounts where they can put money into their scout account for an Eagle project or to pay for summer camp. But they cannot start fundraising for a particular project until it's been approved. Okay. Now, inside the workbook, and I'm not going to read the next several slides here, there are commitments and promises that are made. There is the scout himself and what he is saying he's going to do. And it's always good for the committee to kind of talk that through with the scout, make sure he understands what he's committing to doing. The scoutmaster is also making a commitment to that scout and to that proposal, and they're signing it. You as the committee are doing the same thing. Yours are a little bit different because what you're agreeing to is that you're saying, hey, this particular individual, he is a life scout and he's registered with our unit. You have looked over his proposal and you believe it's feasible, that he can do what he or she can do what he wants to do. And that you will do everything to make sure that the unit supports that scout as they go through this process. Okay. Council also has a commitment as well when they sign off on a scout. And the beneficiary has probably the easiest job because they're basically receiving something. It is important that the beneficiary understand what they're getting. I have had in the last 11 years, I've only had one beneficiary come back to us. It was a scout that was actually making a wishing well at San Jose City Park, History Park. And I think within 2 or 3 weeks after it was completed, the beneficiary had signed off on it. The roof caved in and fell into the well. And the beneficiary called the scout. The scout had gone off to college and said, kind of like, I can't do anything. They called us back. And we actually brought a bunch of scouts down and repaired it. But the beneficiary is also making a commitment as well as we go through this. Okay. All right. As I mentioned earlier, just because the project's been approved does not mean that he's going to become an Eagle Scout. All right. How he goes about doing it and the completion of it are really what's going to drive it. If you have sat in on a Eagle Board of Review, you will find that typically half of the Eagle Board of Review is focused on the project. It's focused on his leadership. It's focused on his plan. It's focused on his work days. It's focused on how did this thing go off? Did he make mistakes? It's okay to make mistakes. We all learn from those mistakes so that hopefully we don't repeat them again. I always get scouts saying, well, everything was perfect. And it's like, really? I've never seen anything happen like that. Nothing's ever perfect. Things go well. But there's always little things that you'll see. And what we're looking for is, are they learning from that in there? And as they go through their project, did they meet all those requirements? Did he or she really provide the leadership? Did the service that they rendered, was it of service to the benefiting organization? Okay. I always love to say this. Everything has to be done by the candidate's 18th birthday. This year is probably the strangest year from an extension perspective. Typically, there are circumstances that occur that allow a scout to go past his 18th birthday. Death in the family, illness. We had a scout a couple of years ago, lost literally all of his scouting, all of his paperwork in a fire that was up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And he couldn't submit everything because he couldn't find it and he had to recreate it. So there are some extenuating circumstances where there are extensions past his or her 18th birthday. This year is a true anomaly. I think we have extended, 20 scouts in our district alone because they couldn't do their projects. The schools, the parks wouldn't let them in to do their work. But in general, we all want to push them to get this all done by their 18th birthday. I have a lot of scouts come to me and say, I just don't know what to do. I don't want to build something. As I mentioned earlier, the number of projects that I've seen in the last 11 years and the staggering array of projects, I'm going to say 70% of them are building, but there are all kinds of other projects that are available out there. If a scout is having a hard time finding one, go on the internet, go do some searches on Eagle projects, and you'll see just a plethora of options. You can always talk to your district advancement chair. He or she has a list of ones that other scouts have done that might trigger them to do something. The biggest thing for selecting a project is making sure it's something that the scout is passionate about, that they're going to be interested in and that they're excited by. We had a scout, it was in the last year, which is not building a project, he conducted a number of biology classes. This kid was just really intrigued in the sciences and biology in particular. And so he decided to put on a number of classes for underprivileged high schools. And he was associated with this biology group that had a lab that allowed students to, quote, rent out the lab for free. And so his service was giving basically 4-hour Saturday sessions, biology sessions for underprivileged high school kids. Now, he didn't do it. He led it. He created the curriculum with some teachers and some others. or volunteering their time to do this. I mean, it was just an amazing thing, but that was his passion. So every kid's got a passion, and that's what you want to do, is you want to help them find that passion. Fundraising. I get a ton of questions on fundraising. Fundraising in and of itself is not a project. You cannot do a fundraising to give money to somebody. You can do fundraising to buy material for your project. You can actually get donations from the charter organization, from other scouts, from the family, GoFundMe, and so on. Okay. It's really important for the scout that he knows, and he's communicating to those people that are donating, that the donations are not for BSA. The donations are for the beneficiary, whether it be the school, the church, whatever organization it is. Okay. And I always love asking this question, especially kids that are doing a lot of fundraising. What do you do with the money that you don't spend? If you raised $1,000 and you only had to spend 800, what do you do with the money? And you can see the eyes working, and you can see the brain working. And you'll see, do I have to give it back? And it's like, well, you don't have to give it back, because it may be hard to find the donor. It depends on how you tracked it. What I always tell the scout is, give it to the benefiting organization, let them decide. The people that donated the money, they were giving it to the church, the school, the park. Let them decide what to do with it. Okay. As I mentioned, the funding can come from the benefiting organization. We have quite a few projects where I'm going to say 80–90% of the funding is from the benefiting organization. They are willing to pay for it. The funding can come from the scout, his parents, his relatives, the chartering organization, so on and so forth. Fundraising from any other source, and if it's over $500, has to get council approval. That's included in the workbook, the Eagle Scout project workbook. Okay. The project coach, I put this in here, and I know some of you attended the class last night around the project coach. I put this in here, not for the committee, but for those of you that are with a troop, to encourage you to consider having project coaches. It's not required, but it really can help the scout, because the project coach can really be the one that is consistent in understanding of the requirements and help the scout along the way. The coach cannot dictate to the scout what he has to do or what he doesn't have to do. He's really there as a coach. Give him ideas, give him support, give the scout options for how they might get funding or the skills necessary to do those things. Okay, so just encourage you as a committee to look at your troop and see if you can identify some folks to be a project coach. I'm not going to go through all of this because, again, several of you were in last night's class, but there's a lot of information there as a project coach. There's, if you go out on BSA, you can find a whole set of material around being a project coach. Okay. So I put this together a number of years ago, as I had a lot of questions, both from parents and from committees and from scouts. Kind of what's the typical sequence? I actually put together a timeline as well, but this is just for the project itself. So the thing that tends to take the longest time is identifying the project. What is it that the scout wants to do? And for what organization do they want to do it? Then the development of the proposal. So putting it down on paper. So they've talked about building cabinets, they've talked about building benches, whatever it may be. Now putting it down into the workbook and begin to flesh out that proposal. What is it going to take to do it? What do I need to think about? Once you've done that, then the scout would get the approval from the benefiting organization, the unit leader, and the unit committee. Now, I just want to make a note here. This says unit committee. It doesn't say committee chair. And the reason I'm drawing that distinction is it is a panel. The intent is a panel. When the scout comes to the district, it's typically a panel. And we want the scouts to know what it's like to go through that group interview where you have several folks talking to you. And this isn't around talking to you through intimidation. This is around different perspectives being asked of you. Our district committee, we have an accountant, we have an engineer, we have a teacher, we have a stay-at-home mom. We have a variety of perspectives, and it's great to look at them and watch them as they go through the proposal, because they all are looking at the proposal with different eyes, and they're going to be asking different questions. And so that's why it says the unit committee. The district committee, that's the next approval. Then the scout would develop that detailed project plan, working with a coach. He would then execute that plan with his volunteers. I get questions frequently from the scouts saying, does it have to be volunteers from the troop? And I said, well, of course not. It's volunteers. You are leading others. It could be from your school, it could be from your church, could be from the troop. It could be people you don't know, but have a passion for whatever it is you're doing. But you do have to lead others. After the plan, after you've executed the project, you do the write-up of the report. And this is really trying to make some observations. This is not in the work environment, it might be called a retrospective or a postmortem. It is kind of a retrospective. It's what are the things that went well, what are the things that didn't go well. It's trying to help that scout go through that process and learn some lessons. The scout will complete the other requirements. Typically the project and the Scoutmaster Conference are the last things they have to do, but not always. They will then complete the application and submit it. The council will review that application, and they'll then approve it, and they'll contact the district advancement chair, and they will then schedule the Eagle board. Okay. So that's kind of the material I had to run through tonight. For those of you that were part of the Eagle Coach last night, or those of you that are just new, any questions or comments or observations that you've learned from doing some of the work that you've done with scouts? Is everybody on mute? Did I mute everybody?
I have a question.
Yes. Oops. Are you muted?
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay.
How about the scout who brings a very smallish project, planting one tree, for example. In the scout, the guidance is there's hours don't matter. There's no project minimum number of hours. How do you address the scout and redirect them to do something that's more substantial?
Well, that is a great question. So typically what I will talk to them about is I will talk to them because I track everything. I'm one of those people that loves statistics and loves to track things. So of the 800 projects that I've approved and reviewed over the years, I have an average number of hours. And to your point, Michael, there is no minimum number of hours, but I will talk about the average is about 200 hours of time, not just your time, it's everybody, the parents, the scoutmaster, the committee, the volunteers. We can't say to the scout, you need to hit that threshold of 200 hours. What we say to the scout is that is a typical project. And what we have seen is that that number of hours tends to give the scout the ability to lead others. Right? And again, and there's no number of people that they can lead. They could lead one person, they can lead 15 people. But when you start to kind of do some of the math and the statistics of what we've seen and what we consider Eagle projects, you use that conversation to try and get the scout to think of things. We will have a scout that will come and say, hey, I'm going to plant a tree or 2 trees. And I'll say, okay, well, I said, that's a great service project. It's not an Eagle project. Is there something else you can do for the beneficiary? Can you plant more trees? Can you do a cleanup project? Can you, again, we'll start throwing things out to try and get the scout to think about how do you might maybe expand that. Because I can't say to them, hey, it's got to be 200 hours. I can't say that.
Right.
I'll talk about averages. Does that help?
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? My guess is you guys are all zoomed out and you're just like, I am done with this.
Could I clarify one of the fundraising questions, please?
Certainly.
If your funds come from, or donations come from family or beneficiary, and it's over 500, do they still need to submit an application?
No.
Okay.
It's typically when you're going outside of those groups. And probably the best example, we can't do that now in COVID times, but there'll be like a pizza night at Round Table, or there'll be Mountain Mike's Pizza, and you'll do a fundraising event there. Those types of things, where it's kind of outside the typical folks that are focusing on that scout.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
So the fundraising, it has to be done, or it doesn't necessarily mean they have to have a fundraising for an Eagle?
They do not have to have a fundraiser. So going back to one of the earlier questions with Michael, one of the things I'll talk to them, they're planting 2 trees. Okay, well, where are you getting the funds to buy the trees? Oh, it's getting donated. And I'll say, well, how would you fundraise for that? Could you fundraise for that as a way of demonstrating leadership? Okay, so if the scout's fundraising, it doesn't mean he's asking mom for $500. It means he's going to go out, maybe do a bake sale, something like that, where he's enlisting others to provide the leadership. In the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've seen more and more projects where the beneficiary is paying for the material. And so there isn't fundraising required.
Okay, so what about if they are, for example, someone needs something for, let's say, Home Depot? Can they write a letter and ask for the donation of the materials for the project? Or something like that?
Absolutely. So there are, and again, this is something that probably your district knows. There are a number of organizations that provide funding or provide discounts. Home Depot, in some cases, will provide funding. They typically provide some kind of a scholarship. What we've noticed over the years is that the money would run out usually by March or April for Home Depot. And then they might provide a discount. One of the lumber yards here in Campbell, Economy Lumber, the owner and the owner's son, who is the manager, were both Eagle Scouts. And I think they have probably helped more Eagle projects than I have, because they will give pretty much at cost the material to the scout. The scout still has to pay for it, but they give them a pretty steep discount.
Thank you.
Yep.
Question.
Yes.
This is about the Eagle coach.
Yep.
So let's say the Eagle coach is not supposed to step in and say, do this or don't do it this way, or those kind of, what if the coach is getting into that mode of giving instructions to the scout, and he or she wants it a certain to go the project a certain way. As a committee, who has that authority to intervene or give feedback to the coach? As a committee?
That is a great question. And it not only is the coach, it's the parents and it's the scoutmaster. When we do the proposal review, we will talk to the scout and I'll ask him questions like, oh, is your mom and dad going to help out? Oh yeah. It's okay. And I said, so now you know that this is your project, not your mom or dad's. Oh yeah. And I'll ask him, well, so what are you going to do if they start to interfere? And you'll see them, they'll kind of be looking up at the air and they're going, I don't know. And I said, well, here's what we have found works. Now this is with a parent or with a scoutmaster. It's different with a coach, and I'll get to that. We'll ask them to talk to the parent or the leader that they're worried about ahead of time. This is my project. This is my Eagle. If you have something to share with me, I want to hear it, but I'd appreciate it if you would call me off to the side and share it with me. If you do it in front of everyone, they will automatically start to look at you as the leader, and I am the leader, and this is my project. So that's kind of a different than what you asked. In the case of an Eagle coach, it really can be up to the committee, could be up to the scoutmaster. In the troop that I'm associated with, we actually have it's a subset of the advancement committee, and they're focused on Eagle Scouts. And there's 5 or 6 of them, and they're coaches, and they also do the review. And there has been times where I have stepped in and I've said, you guys can't do that. This is the scout. The scout has to learn. Now, it may be a mistake, but he has to learn. Now, of course, in any of these environments, if there is something that is going to be harmful or someone's going to get hurt, the adult has to step in. But the coach cannot tell them how to do the project. The coach has to coach him through it. If that coach can't do that, whether it's the committee or the scoutmaster, they may have to ask that person to step out. It's hard because as an adult, we've done a lot of this stuff and we know what needs to be done. And it's real easy for us to jump in and say, okay, let's go do it, because we've done it. But that doesn't help them learn.
Based on what you just say, I think that's great, what you just say. Is any way, like you've been doing this for the adults, is any way, any preparation, recently all these trainings for adults, I think they have a very valuable information, and it's amazing how much we learn. But is any way to give this kind of class to the scouts, like that are a life level or life rank, and then so they can have an idea, because a lot of them are just lost. They don't know what to do. What are the possibilities for them to have this? It's exactly what you just say, to tell them, to tell the parents, to tell the coach, would be great for them to hear it, I think.
So I'm not sure what district you're with. I'm with Pioneer District, and I actually have a class that I teach. It's called Project Management for Life Scouts. And it's all about how do I, select a project, how do I execute it, how do I get my proposal, all that kind of stuff. So you might want to check with your district advancement person. Unfortunately, it's not a course that's offered through BSA. It's a course that I put together, but I also know that Polaris has done something. So what district are you with?
Coyote Creek.
Polaris?
Coyote Creek.
Oh, okay, Coyote Creek.
But is there a chance when you do your course, can you send us an invite to participate in your course, or send our scouts there with you?
You know what? I have gone to so many troops and presented to them because I just love watching. I love watching the kids accomplish this stuff. I would be more than happy to talk to someone in your troop and help you guys. Absolutely.
Really? Oh my God, that'd be great. We have a lot of life scouts right now,
Yep.
and they need something like this, I guess. So
Yep.
is that okay if I can put you in contact with our Scoutmaster?
You bet. You
Thank
bet.
you so much.
Yep.
Hi, Todd. Can you
Yes.
touch up a little bit on tracking hours for the project?
Oh,
Like when can they start?
that is a great question. So literally the second they're starting to think about potential projects is when you want them to start tracking their hours. And I've always had a hard time communicating with the scouts that we're talking about, you know, man hours or people hours, not just your hours. And I will say to the scout, so when the scout comes down to the district to review his project, there's typically 4 of us there. It's about a 15-minute review. I go, that's 1 hour. That's 1 person hour of labor. And they should start it as soon as they've, you know, starting to work on identifying the project, all the way through to the completion. And so if you think about that, you know, starting at the, you know, kind of pre-proposal all the way through, coming up with 200 hours, it's not hard. You know, writing up a project plan is going to be 25, 30 hours pretty easily. Just going shopping, you know, doing your research, doing your homework. It's really easy to start thinking about how do you hit 200 hours. It's not hard, but they should start it immediately.
But they can't start tracking that unless they're a Life Scout, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. You can't start working on this until you're alive. Yeah. Yeah. So if he's thinking about it and he's star, it's for free.
So for example, on hours, when the scout goes and sits with the unit committee for the approval of his proposal, does that meeting count as hours? And then do the hours of each committee member count?
Yep. They do.
Okay.
And we're not trying to pad the hours. What we're trying to get the scout to think about is there's a lot of people involved in this, and there's a lot of effort that's going in to this volunteer activity. And you want to be able to demonstrate both to the beneficiary as well as to your Eagle board, you've put a lot of time into this, and a lot of people have put time into this.
I had a question. I think identifying project can take several hours. I mean, scouts are brainstorming. So you really start logging hours after you have an idea and you decide to pursue?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And do you recommend scouts thinking when they are towards the end of star rank to start thinking? Or do you ask them to wait until they're live scouts to?
Well, it's an interesting question because one of the merit badges that are Eagle required is a project, not to actually carry out a project, but to plan a project. And I'm also a personal management merit badge counselor, and I'll tell the scout, you know, you ought to think about using your Eagle project for this part of the requirement. You kind of get 2 birds with 1 stone. You got to think about a plan. Now you don't, for the merit badge, you don't have to actually execute the project. You just have to plan it. And so potentially, if the scout is a star or a first class or a star scout and he's working on that merit badge, he could be spending some time working on his project. But most scouts don't. Most scouts get that merit badge and they start working on their project as a life scout. And so it's really at that point forward that you would consider it, the hours.
So which was the merit badge that you mentioned? Which
Personal management.
Okay, so you could leverage that to
Yeah.
actually make, okay. And also, is there something that you look upon, how many people the scout is leading? Is like 4 or 10 on an average, or that's
You
more?
know, I've never tracked that. They started tracking it at the council probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm going to say your typical project is probably 6 to 10 volunteers, you know, and it could be over, 4 days, could be over 2 days, something like that.
Okay. And the fundraising, like you mentioned, bake, would that also be towards the hours, or that's independent? How? Because that's
No,
under,
that would be included in the hours
it would be, okay.
because you are
Uh-huh.
spending, and your volunteers are spending time, in this case, baking, so that they can raise money to do the actual project. So all of that would count.
So are you looking for some, I mean, since this would be the first time the scouts are doing, they may be exceeding more than 200. I'm just saying, I don't know exactly, but they could exceed way more hours even before their work day. So is that something, I mean, there is some learning, but how do you see something like that?
So like I said, I've been tracking this for 11 years. The average project, the number of hours is 200. But I've had scouts that have tracked 800, 850 hours. There are also projects that are 100 hours along the way. And you can kind of tell the difference in terms of what they're putting into it from what they're getting out of it as well. If they don't have to raise money, they obviously aren't going to get that component of time, but they can do it in other ways.
Okay, I think that was a good one to know. So this is, it all depends on what they pursue.
Yep. Yeah.
So one last question. Is there any, I heard you mention about internet, but what are the other ways they could be brainstormed, what they can pursue? Is there like a past Eagle projects that they can, some place where?
If they go on the internet, there's quite a few councils that list all the Eagle projects. Our council started to list all the Eagle projects, and then they took it down for some privacy concerns. I have a list of, for our district, of about 800 projects. And I would never divulge names, but it'll actually say, hey, built a cabinet for, second harvest food bank or things like that. It'll give them some ideas. So if they're struggling, we can do that. If the scout is associated with something other than scouting, whether it be band at school or some other extracurricular activity, it could be taekwondo or something like that. If that's their passion, go talk to them. You'd be surprised what people will come up with. We've had scouts that have done projects for places where their grandparents live, nursing homes. And again, it's because there's an association and there's a passion there. And so they'll go to the nursing home and say, hey, I'm a Life Scout. I'm trying to do an Eagle project. I'm looking for something I can do to help out grandpa and the other residents of the nursing home or whatever. It's amazing what people will do to help that scout find something to do. But again, like I said, we've got lists if your scout is really struggling with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Todd, I have some feedback for Kalpana on one of her questions. For Kalpana, you asked, hey, how many, is there an upper limit on the number of volunteers you can have? And I think the answer is no. However, one practical consideration when advising a scout would be if he's going to have a work event, like they're going to be digging or raking, or there's the area can only accommodate so many workers. So I have seen scouts overload their work site, and you literally just have people just sitting around because they can't physically get into the space and do any work. So that's something to think about, is just make sure the scout's planning an appropriate number of people for the work that needs to be accomplished.
Michael, that's a great point. And let me just add on to it, because we do ask, how many people do you think you need for your work days? And it'll be interesting because they'll say, oh, we need 20. And to your point, Michael, well, it's a garden bed that's 6 by 6. You can't get 20 people to work in the garden bed. Or it's intricate woodworking, or it's intricate painting. And we'll say, well, how many do you need? And they'll say, well, 2 or 3. And I say, okay, well, are you gonna be discerning whether it's a younger scout or an older scout? Because that matters. And that, again, that's part of that leadership, because you don't want 11-year-olds with certain tools, and you don't want 11-year-olds trying to paint something that you need to have perfectly painted. And I'm not saying 11-year-olds can't paint perfectly, but we all know that when you get a bunch of 11-year-olds together, they get kind of goofy and kind of silly, and things are flying everywhere. So we try and get them to think about the number of people and the type of people. And it's interesting is as you start to work with the older scouts that are coming in that have worked on several Eagle projects, and they've watched these other Eagles or Life Scouts struggle with the leadership part. And they'll go, oh, I'm not going to do what John did. He had way too many 11-year-olds, or whatever it may be. And so it's really important that they, depending upon the project, that they think about what are the volunteers that you can lead. It's a great question, great comment, Michael.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about volunteers. So how would one ask or seek out volunteers for their project?
So there's any number of ways, and it kind of depends on the project. I'm going to say 90% of the projects are staffed by other scouts or scouters. You'll get a lot of scouts that have aged out to come back and work on their best friend's project because he's a year younger, or so on and so forth. But typically it will be through a sign up through the troop. They'll send an email out asking for volunteers and saying, hey, I've got a work day on Saturday. I need 6 people or whatever it may be. Please sign up. But we've also had projects where it's at the school, and it's for the band or it's something like that, and all the volunteers are through the school. Some cases it's an open volunteer request through the school. In other cases it's his 4 best buddies that he's asked to help on the project with. But it's typically through the troop, and it's typically they'll do a sign up or an email asking for volunteers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we are we're past the top of the hour. I want to thank you all for being here tonight and committing to help the program and help the Scouts achieve their Eagle rank. I will say, like I said at the beginning, it's probably the funnest job I've had in scouting. It's just a lot of fun to watch what these kids will come up with and what they end up carrying out. So again, I thank you for your time and your questions tonight. Feel free to drop me an email if you'd like, if you have further questions or would like some help.
This was
Thank you so
thanks so
much.
much.